Chapter 7. The general of the droid armies paced restlessly across the bridge, eagerly awaiting the arrival of the enemy fleet. He did not ignore his son's warning or his mental plea. He decided to take precautions and already made the necessary arrangements concerning the infiltration of his ship by the clone commando unit. They were in for quite the surprise if Zikalov's dream was even remotely accurate. He sometimes had doubts about this force ability that Dooku claimed his son had. After witnessing some of those premonitions actually occur, he began to believe that it was very real. If only he himself had that very power. To know in advance what the enemy would do, could practically make him invincible. Maybe one day he would find a way, a miraculous way to gain that power. For now he considered himself fortunate that his son had it. He would grow up to be a most powerful ally. Together, my son, we will destroy the Republic and the Jedi. Only then will our people truly be free. Although Zikalov was still just a boy, he was shaping into a good warrior. Grievous was satisfied with the progress he was making. The child now, aside from his mental tutoring, trained 4 hours a day. Grievous taught him novice-level lightsaber techniques in addition to basic forms. His son had quite an aptitude for learning them, much like his father. The child would soon be observing another birthday within the next 8 months. Zikalov would be 9 standard years old. Count Dooku was growing impatient with him for his lack of success in terminating Asajj Ventress. The old man told him that if she wasn't dead by the child's next birthday, Zikalov would then be the one who would perish. The general vowed that would never happen. His son would live, by any means necessary. He stopped pacing when he saw the enemy fleet drop out of hyperspace just outside the forward viewport. Just ahead of his own fleet, 2 Republic light assault cruisers escorted 1 Acclamator-class Republic assault ship. The separatist fleet he currently commanded was comprised of 3 Trade Federation cruisers and 1 Lucrehulk-class battleship. The general was confident he did not need the invisible hand or the malevolence for this campaign. If intelligence served correct, that main Republic assault ship was being commanded by a rookie captain, recently promoted when the original Jedi Knight spy, aiding the Republic in a purely reconnaissance mission, perished on Christophsis by 3 elite squads of commando droids 2 weeks prior. The Republic ships had been en route to Coruscant to pick up 2 Jedi so they could continue their blasted missions. Bring deflector shields up at maximum and open fire. He growled through his mask as he took a seat in his command chair. Vulture droid starfighters and droid tri-fighters flew out of the launch bays and began shooting down the clone ARC 170s and the handful of Z-95 clone headhunter ships that had engaged them. Amidst the chaos of the space battle around them, he spotted 4 T-19 Torrent starfighters, most likely bearing 4 commando clones no less, headed for Grievous's Lucrehulk-class battleship. Let them come. This is a mission they won't walk away from, he laughed evilly and then broke down into a coughing fit. This battle was a devious ambush that General Grievous orchestrated, and so far it was going quite well. He ordered his main batteries to open fire on the clone commando ships, but they vanished beneath the belly of the ship. They were no doubt in the process of boarding in the lower levels. They were in for the surprise of their lives. He chuckled evilly. The fools. 10 minutes later, the 4 commandos known as Zeta Squad cut their way through the access shaft that would lead them into the passageway that would take them to the reactor core of the vessel they had boarded. The leader of the squad, Crossbones, led his troops out of the access shaft into the belly of the ship. If we succeed, Grievous will be nothing more than a memory, men. Let's get this done. They followed the overhead conduits to an intersection. Come on, squad. Our objective lies just ahead. We will need to split up into teams. Razor and Sigma, take out the main reactor core and disable the engines. Jasper and I will destroy their shield generator. The 4 commandos split into pairs and parted ways. Soon all 4 commandos met some light resistance and shot down enemy droids. Is it just me, or is this too easy? Sigma asked the question that was beginning to plague all of Zeta Squad. When Sigma and Razor reached the main reactor core, not a droid was in sight. Come on, let's set the charges. I have a bad feeling about this, Razor groaned. Razor watched Sigma's back as he dug through the backpack they brought and pulled out the explosives. Just as he stood up after attaching the first charge to the reactor, a hologram fizzled out revealing their true predicament. They were surrounded by droidicas and B-1 battle droids. All of them had their weapons pointed at them. It's a trap. Sigma flipped the switch on the one charge he currently held in his hand and threw it at one of the droidicas. He picked up his rifle and began shooting, leaving the other charges on the floor. Both commandos shot their way through a few B-1 droids and dove behind a couple of crates in a corner of the room. How in the criff did they know we would be here? I don't know, but we have to complete our mission. Just as they finished picking off the remaining B-1 battle droids, 3 squads of B-2 battle droids marched into the room, blocking their only exit. It looked like there was no escape. The droids slowly advanced on their position. Well, I hope the other 2 aren't having as difficult a time as us. Razor threw a couple grenades, blowing up 2 super battle droids. It seemed like whenever they destroyed one, 2 more took its place. The commandos knew this was one fight they weren't walking away from. They had a feeling when they left the Republic fleet that this would result in a suicide mission. They were right. I'm running low on ammo and I'm down to my last grenade, Razor admitted with sorrow creeping into his voice. It's been an honor serving with you, Sigma clasped hands with his brother. Well, if we're going down, we'll be damn sure we're taking General Grievous down with us. Let's make some noise, Razor shouted above the sound of heavy blaster fire. Sigma popped up from behind his cover. For the Republic. He shot the charges lying on the floor, including the one already armed on the reactor core. The entire room exploded, the whining, progressively dying reactor core reached a high-frequency pitch and then blew up. All droids were destroyed in the process, the 2 clone commandos perishing with them. They died honorably, achieving the mission entrusted to them. The engines on the ship were now disabled and the shields on the ship were already weakening as the Republic focused all of their firepower on taking out the largest separatist vessel. If only the rest of Zeta Squad fared any better. Zeta Squad's leader and his compatriot fell into a similar such trap down by the shield generator, only this time they were not given the option of fighting back. They were set upon rather unexpectedly by enemy forces and raised their hands in surrender as blasters were shoved into their backsides and the side of their helmets. They kicked and struggled as the droids took them captive, but they were rendered unconscious by a Nemoidian officer that accompanied the droids that was under Grievous's command, with a stun blast set on maximum power. They were cuffed and dragged out of the room and down to the hangar bay and into a shuttle already prepped and waiting for them. They took off and left just as the shields failed, leaving the crippled vessel to its doomed fate. They were escorted by a squad of Vulture starfighters. The shuttle landed in the hangar of one of the droid assault cruisers. The boarding ramp lowered and the 2 captives and Nemoidian officer exited the ship where General Grievous was waiting for them. Take them up to the bridge. Yes, sir. The droids and separatist officer took the prisoners up to the bridge, Grievous trailing them. He sat down stoically in his command chair, the 2 unconscious commandos thrown at his feet. They woke up a few minutes later and struggled to sit up with both hands cuffed behind their backs. The leader, Crossbones, growled when he realized where they were. General Grievous, we succeeded in crippling your ship. It's only a matter of time before your shields fail. You have lost. Oh really? Look outside the viewport. The 2 commandos did and saw the Lucrehube-class battleship, frozen in place and no longer moving. They could see from a distance the damage done to it. The engines were offline and the heavy assault from the Republic's main batteries began to break through the shielding. You succeeded in crippling one of my ships. You infiltrated the wrong one, if your intent was to destroy me. The 2 defeated clone commandos remained silent for a moment. There was one question that was eating them alive that they desperately needed answered. How did you know we were coming? Zeta Squad's leader questioned incredulously. Since you are about to be executed and the information I'm about to give you will go down with you to your graves, I will tell you. He stood up from his chair, towering above them, and casually clasped his hands behind his back. My youngest son has a force ability that allows him to see the future. You were right, I was originally on board that ship but transferred over to this assault cruiser once I learned of your pathetic attempt to terminate me. All three glanced out the window when a spectacular explosion filled the black void of space. They witnessed 2 missiles hitting the bridge of the other ship, destroying it right after the shields failed. You would have succeeded in your mission. I would now be dead, if it were not for my son. What's your son's name? Grievous laughed and used a claw to tip the helpless clone commando's helmeted head up so they were staring each other straight in the eyes. What's it matter to you, clone? Just curious, I never knew you had any children. His name is Zikalov. And he will be the doom of your precious republic. He let go of the commando, completely missing something incredibly vital. The clone commando released the button on his wrist that was still bound behind his back and transmitted the recorded conversation he just had with General Grievous to his Republic assault ship's mainframe. Soon, the Separatist fleet succeeded in turning the Republic ships into a retreat. They all vanished, blasting into hyperspace, unknowingly leaving the 2 clone commandos to their fate. Anything else you would like to know before I kill you? Grievous ignited his purple lightsaber. Yeah. Is your son a cyborg freak like you? Crossbone's mockery was sparked by his defiance. Grievous roared in fury, and in his anger he decapitated the commando leader. His teammates screamed at him. No. You sick psycho freak. I hope you burn in hell. With the swing of his lightsaber, he executed that clone as well. He looked at his subordinates, paying no mind to the clone's cold, lifeless corpses, and returned to his command chair. Throw their bodies out the airlock. Then set coordinates for the invisible hand's location and jump to hyperspace immediately. His crew scrambled to do as he ordered, and soon their fleet was underway, jumping to hyperspace. Meanwhile, Zikalov was in the training room taking out his aggression on some training droids. He tried to smother his fear with anger but found himself failing. He hoped his warning was not ignored and that his father actually listened to him. As he was completing one of his lightsaber forms, he paused and stretched out to his father with the force, almost afraid of what he'd find. Then he felt it, his father was alive and on his way back to him. He felt the greatest relief he'd ever felt in his life, and he released a pent-up sigh he'd been holding in. So, he had acted on his warning after all. Good. About 7 hours later, General Grievous returned to the invisible hand. Zikalov raced to the docking bay where his father was just striding down the boarding ramp of his shuttle. Father. The child ran to him. He didn't embrace him but instead grasped his father's cybernetic hand, his own small hand fitting perfectly in Grievous's palm. I'm so glad you're okay. I am okay, thanks to you. Grievous gently and lovingly ruffled Zikalov's hair, earning a surprised cry of dismay. Hey! I just combed that. You're messing up my hair, he pouted as only a child would. Grievous chuckled in good humor. He crouched down and placed one large hand on the child's shoulder. You were right, Zikalov. Everything happened exactly as you dreamt. Only I survived and they didn't. Zikalov's golden eyes widened. You killed the 4 clones that snuck on board the ship? Yes, I did. They snuck on board the ship I would have been on and succeeded only halfway in their mission. I captured 2 of them and allowed them to drown in their defeat, just before I executed them. Before his father could protest or chastise him, he flung himself against the general's chest and hugged him. I'm so glad you're alive, father. I was worried. I was scared you wouldn't listen to me. Grievous gently pried the boy off of him and met his eyes with his own golden ones. Am I not your father, boy? Why wouldn't I listen to you, after everything that's happened so far? Zikalov looked down at the floor in shame. Why did he doubt his father to begin with? Over the course of time, the Kalish youngling recognized that his progenitor began to treasure and act upon many of his prophetic dreams and his gift of foresight. He felt silly for losing faith in him. I'm sorry. I'm just scared of losing you. Grievous stood up to his full height and stared down at him. That is a childish fear and one that you will outgrow in the course of time. You have no need to fear, Zekalov Quilamek Shilal. I'll always be here for you, until you have grown into the greatest warrior the galaxy has ever seen. There will come a day when you will not need me anymore. Zekalov shook his head. That's impossible. I'll always need you. Grievous chuckled again. So says my child. I am not here to argue with you, little one. Go now and finish your training for the day. It is time for me to continue my search for that wretched Sith. She will soon die by my hand and the Count will finish your training. Zekalov nodded in acceptance. Okay. The boy left his father then and returned to the training room. The general of the droid armies found his way back to the bridge. Status report. Captain Selvk bowed graciously to him and began reading his report from the datapad in his hands. Our fleet is running at full strength. And our task force sent to Felucia was successful in their mission to claim the planet for the separatist cause. Excellent, Grievous said in high approval. Although there have been rumors and reports of a rogue female Jedi wielding 2 red lightsabers that have recently come to my attention during your absence. 3 days ago a most recent sighting was reported by a scouting patrol in the Teth system. That is no Jedi. Do you know this female renegade, sir? She is our new mission now. Set a course for the planet Teth immediately. Captain Selvk began shouting orders to the droid crew stationed on the bridge. A few minutes later, Grievous's fleet jumped to hyperspace. Grievous narrowed his golden eyes as he watched the stars whiz past in a blur of light and felt an exhilaration he hadn't felt in months. I have you in my grasp now, Ventress. You will not escape me this time. You are about to meet your end at my hands, count on it. Chapter 8. A Republic officer relayed vital information to the Jedi Council once he received the intelligence that Zeta Squad sent to his ship, concerning one of their most hated enemies. Yoda and Obi-Wan Kenobi took the report into careful consideration. A lot of my men died to bring you this news, Master Jedi. I sure hope it turns the war in our favor. You can be sure that your men did not die in vain, Obi-Wan assured him. Yes, sir. Let us know what else we can do and my troops and I will see it done. Thank you, Captain. You did well. The Jedi Council will take it from here. The Republic officer bowed respectfully and then cut the holo transmission, disappearing from view to leave the 2 Jedi to ponder in peace. Once again General Grievous's overconfidence led to this slip-up. Indeed. Boasting to the commandos, he should have not. Well, at least, his arrogance worked in our favor. I still can't believe General Grievous has a son. And force-sensitive the boy is. What should our next course of action be? Take your apprentice and his Padawan to the last known coordinates. Beyond saving, the boy is not. So it's not too late for this child to forsake what little Sith training he's had already? Indeed, Yoda began walking through the vast Jedi library they were currently in. Do you really think this boy will turn on his own father and help us defeat him? A possible outcome, it is. Give up on the child, you must not. We'll do our best, Master. We'll depart right away. Obi-Wan bowed to Yoda and then left the Hall of Records to meet up with Anakin and his Padawan Ahsoka. He found them in one of the hangar bays tinkering with a speeder bike. Anakin, Ahsoka, we have an important mission we must embark upon immediately. What sort of important mission? Anakin asked suspiciously. Obi-Wan told them all about the information regarding General Grievous's force-sensitive son. Are you kidding me? This is a joke, right? Anakin questioned with a wry smile, apparently amused. I'm afraid not. We must do everything we can to carry him far from separatist reach and from the Sith. Then what are we waiting for? Ahsoka questioned with a smile. She loved a good adventure, especially one that was challenging and filled with many dangers. She was a youngling that hated being confined to the Jedi Temple and happily followed her master Anakin on any mission they were called away on. The 3 Jedi boarded Anakin's ship, which for all intents and purposes, Looked like a pile of scrap ready for the junkyard, and they lifted off. Looks were pretty deceiving because the ship they were currently on was heavily modified by one of the best mechanics the galaxy had ever known. Anakin Skywalker took great pride in his work, and his ship was no exception. They left the Jedi Temple and flew beyond Coruscant's atmosphere and blasted off into hyperspace. General Grievous sat serenely in his command chair, his soon-to-be 9-year-old son standing beside him. Zekalov was currently garbed in Sith apprentice attire that Dooku had left for him. The black tunic and leggings fit him well enough, and he had his yellow training saber clipped on his belt. His war mask, the one he had made after killing the Mew Mew, covered his face, and he felt excitement concerning the mission his father was currently on. He glanced at his father for just a moment and saw him deep in thought, no doubt mentally preparing himself for his daring escapade. He returned his gaze straight ahead and remained silent. The two of them stared out of the forward viewport in anticipation and watched the streaking stars suddenly jerk away as their ship fell out of hyperspace. Looming before them was a red and white marbled planet, filled with an assortment of wildlife and flora. This planet was comprised of jungles, plains, and rocky outcroppings. There were a few rancor that were known to inhabit the jungles, as well as some type of a large flying insect. General Grievous knew of a monastery hewn within a cliffside at the base of one of the planet's jungle regions. That was going to be the first place he would look. He had a feeling that the female Dathomirian which was lurking there, no doubt waiting for him. "I'm going to face the wench myself. Stay on board the ship and do not follow me." General Grievous gave his son a hard look that he had given the boy many times before in the past that promised punishment if he disobeyed him. "Yes, father," the Kaleesh youngling nodded. "Captain Selk, destroy any unknown ships that attempt to flee the planet." "Yes, sir," the captain nodded respectfully. General Grievous left the bridge and went directly to his private quarters and grabbed 4 of his prized lightsabers and his cloak, and with a flourish of his cape left his room and boarded his fighter craft. He went down to the planet and landed on one of the landing pads, knowing that there would be no way he could sneak up on the witch when she was most likely already aware that his fleet was within the planet's orbit thanks to her accursed force powers. He strode confidently down the walkway leading from his ship to the monastery and squinted his golden reptilian eyes when he entered the dimly lit structure. He fingered 2 of his lightsabers, creeping cautiously around the many hallways, one of them soon leading him into a much larger room with statues and a second level above. He had the feeling then that he was being watched. "I know you are here, Ventress. Show yourself." The energetic hum of 2 lightsabers activating alerted him to her presence. He leapt aside and rolled clear of her first attack. She stood and smirked at him. "You came alone with no droids? I should be insulted. I don't need any droids to destroy you. You are so wrong about that, Grievous. You will not leave this planet alive, I can promise you," she growled dangerously low. She ran at him with lightsabers twirling, and the general activated the 2 that he already had in his hands and met her head on with a snarl. His blue and purple lightsabers collided with Asajj's red ones. They locked lightsabers for a minute and he lashed out a foot and kicked her, shoving her back a few feet. She narrowed her eyes angrily, her rage prominent within those red-hued irises. "You are a fool to think you can best me," Asajj growled angrily. "I don't think I can best you, I know I can." He roared and ran at her with a flurry of lightsaber attacks, summoning them up from years of training and practice, pulling many of his moves from other lightsaber forms. Coupled with his own strength, the general of the droid armies fought her with a mix of raw power. He knew he didn't need the Force to destroy her. "Surrender to me and I will make your death swift, Ventress. Surrender to me and I will make yours last." They continued to duel, filling the darkness around them with flashes of light and with a mix of sound. Ventress somersaulted over Grievous and Force leapt to the second level. Grievous looked up at her through his warm mask and laughed. "Running from me, are you? I thought you wanted a fight. Come and get me, if you dare." She disappeared from sight and Grievous knew she planned on waylaying him with some sort of trap. He used his clawed hands and sharply taloned feet to pierce the stone structure and climbed up swiftly, making it in record time to the second level. He couldn't see the witch anywhere. Only the soft hum of his lightsabers filled his audios. Now where could you have scampered off to? Grievous narrowed his gold reptilian eyes and surveyed his surroundings. He saw an old control panel on the wall to his left and punched it with his fist, destroying it. A heavy clanking sound filled the vast space and he peered over the railing to see that the only entrance to the room had been sealed shut and was now permanently locked. He resumed his hunt. You have nowhere to run and few places left to hide, wretch. He jerked his head above him when the telltale whisper of cloth moving in the catwalks overhead accompanied by a dark shadow revealed her location. She dropped down from her hiding place in front of him and swung one lightsaber, intending to behead him. Fortunately, the general anticipated her action and easily blocked, delivering a few savage blows on her himself. She backflipped and disappeared into the darkness of the catwalks overhead yet again and deactivated her lightsabers, returning to her stealth mode. General Grievous strained his audios for the slightest sound that would reveal his worthy adversary and kept his eyes sharp. I grow tired of your games, Ventress. Dark female laughter echoed in the vast space around him, putting him on edge. Reveal yourself so we can finish this, here and now. Grievous began to grow impatient. With a dark streak, she launched herself from the catwalks above, to the ground below on the first floor and looked up at him with a haughty smirk. If you want me, droid boy, come and get me. Grievous threw himself over the railing and landed heavily on his large, metallic geranium feet and cracked the cement beneath him. It ends here. I know why you were sent to assassinate me. Rumor has it that Dooku plans to train one of your little brats to take my place at his side. I assure you, General, that will never happen. Believe what you want. Your death has already been foreseen and you will soon meet your end. Grievous was bluffing on that last bit. As far as he knew, this duel with Ventress had never been foreseen by his son, and he truthfully didn't know how it was going to end. He was determined to succeed in his mission and terminate her regardless. Once I've killed you, I'll be sure to pay your child a visit. I'll deliver your head to your son and then I'll make him suffer until he begs me for death. Only then will I kill him and deliver his cold, misery-ridden, puny, little lifeless corpse to Dooku. Grievous felt what little blood he had start to boil in absolute fury. She sneered and then tapped a finger on her chin as if in thought and then continued. Or I can make your son my slave, or better yet, I can make him my pet. How does that sound? Grievous roared and launched himself at her, driven by a bloodthirsty rage. They engaged in lightsaber combat yet again. Grievous unfolded his two extra appendages and unleashed his fury, full force upon her. He was laughing on the inside when he saw Asajj struggling to keep him at bay. She somersaulted over his head and neatly sliced off two of his 4 mechanical arms. Grievous snarled in rage and blocked her next attack. His attempt to decapitate her failed when she ducked and force pushed him away. Your force powers cannot stop me, he laughed insanely. The general rolled clear of her downward thrust that was meant to impale him where he had been laying on the floor, and he performed a leg sweep on her so fast it would have looked like a blur to the naked eye. Ventress fell down hard on her back, knocking the wind out of her. One of her 2 lightsabers got knocked out of her hand and it rolled a few yards away. Grievous towered above her and laughed. He had fought her a few times before and knew many of her strategies. Asajj, too, had been trained by Count Dooku, and much that she had learned from the old Sith, Grievous had learned as well. He knew exactly what she would do next and acted quickly. Asajj clenched her teeth in anger and used the Force to pull her fallen lightsaber to her. In the blink of an eye, Grievous, with one swift swipe, used his own saber to cut her lightsaber hilt in half mid-flight back to her outstretched hand. While she was distracted doing that, he slashed his other saber downward in an attempt to cut her in half. She blocked with the other remaining saber in her hand and their sabers remained locked. Grievous pushed down, slowly moving Ventress's own red saber closer and closer to her throat. She used both hands on her hilt now, her arms beginning to shake as beads of sweat dripped down the side of her face. Admit defeat. Grievous cackled madly. Never. She was too busy trying not to lose her head to return any other snide remarks. She growled and summoned the Force to force push him off of her. That was exactly the move Grievous had been waiting for. As an invisible force shoved him up and away from her, he knocked her saber aside with one quick swipe, leaving her completely open and exposed. Before she had a chance to bring her saber up to protect her chest, he used his other arm to launch his other saber at her like a spear. It spiraled smoothly downward and his saber hit its mark. Ventress screamed when Grievous's purple-bladed lightsaber impaled her through her midsection, pinning her to the floor. The general's body slammed painfully into a nearby column, leaving him stunned for a moment on the smooth, stone floor. He shook his head to clear his dazed vision and looked up to see Ventress use the Force to invisibly hit the switch on the hilt to deactivate the saber that had impaled her. She moaned in absolute agony. Grievous got up and walked cautiously up to her. He had the suspicion she would try one last attempt to destroy him before succumbing to death. He held his lightsaber up defensively, at the ready. The general stood victoriously over her dying body and retrieved his purple lightsaber that had rolled down past her feet. Her breathing slowly became more labored. She had her other red saber hilt, now deactivated, and held it to her chest weakly, as if to stop her life force from slowly ebbing out of her body. I never imagined it would end like this. She closed her eyes and clenched her jaw shut from both anger and pain. Your death ensures my son's life and his future. For that I thank you. Her weak laugh turned into a choked cough. Her breath rattled in her lungs as she clung a few more seconds to life. You better hope your son becomes a better Sith than me. Or he will someday for sure meet my fate. As she slipped closer into death, what she spoke next was in a near whisper. You will come to find it would have been better if your son had not have lived. He will suffer mercilessly at Dooku's hands, and he will turn on you to appease his new master. Heed my words, for they are my last. With a wheezy exhale, Ventress closed her eyes and finally surrendered to death. Grievous stood silently and could only stare down at her lifeless body as her warning reverberated within his mind, creating a great uneasiness that began to squeeze at his heart. His son would never turn on him, would he? He went over to a nearby slab of stone and sat down heavily, deep in thought, completely disregarding his slain opponent that lay a few yards in front of him. He was not entirely educated or privy enough to know what went on behind closed doors between a Sith master and his apprentice. What he did know was that an apprentice was bound to obey every command given to him by his master, or face his own death. Maybe what Ventress spoke had a kernel of truth. The warrior within him knew that it was necessary for Zekalov to train and become one of the greatest warriors the galaxy had ever known. It was his destiny and his heritage. The father in him feared for his son's future at Count Dooku's hands. The only reason he allowed Dooku to train his son was to save his child's life. The Sith Lord would no doubt have killed Zekalov outright if Grievous had refused. The general laughed internally when something dawned on him. The old man was afraid of what Zekalov could become and would rather have his powerful son with him and not against him. Zekalov had great potential. If Grievous could have his way, he would see Dooku dead. Perhaps someday, when the time was right, he and his son would destroy the Count together. Then his son would be free of Sith oppression and could finally master his own destiny. Grievous wanted his son to return home to Cali. The father in him wanted to see his son safe and to see him happy. He would be damned if he allowed his son to remain slave to the Sith forever. He narrowed his eyes at the thought. He stood and walked towards the door and swore when he realized he had sealed himself in the room to prevent Ventress's escape. He could cut his way through the stone with a lightsaber, but in all truthfulness, Grievous was tired after his duel. So he used his comlink to call his ship and commanded a squadron of droids to come and blast the door open for him. It didn't take long for the droids to get there. The general of the droid armies picked up both of Ventress's lightsabers, or at least what was left of the second one, and took them with him as proof that he had slain Dooku's apprentice. He wearily returned to the ship and took his usual place in his command chair. Zekalov came to stand before him and placed a hand on the general's knee plating. "Are you all right, father?" Grievous nodded tiredly at his son. "I am indeed." The child removed his war mask and took his hand from his father's knee and looked down at the floor for a moment in thought, and then looked up at him again. "You won't tell me what is wrong?" His father looked at him with quizzical eyes. "What makes you think something troubles me?" Zekalov met his father's eyes with his own and placed a hand on his chest, over his heart. "I can feel it." Father and son stared at each other for a moment. Grievous was at a loss of what to say. "It's okay, father, you don't have to tell me. I just want you to know that I care." His son grasped one of his father's hands and smiled at him. Grievous felt a pang of remorse as he gazed down at his loving son, the child still so innocent and naive, completely unaware of the hell he was soon going to endure. Would the ends justify the means? Was it a fair trade, saving his son from certain death only to allow him to live a life of great pain and suffering at Dooku's hands? Was Ventress right when she told him he would one day regret that his son had lived? The time was drawing near when he would have to surrender him into Dooku's cruel custody. His son had every right to hate him in the future. Maybe one day the boy would understand why he did it. Why he abandoned him and left him with a cruel and unforgiving master. He did what any desperate father would do to save his child's life. This was the only way his son would survive. Maybe someday, if the boy was ordered to slay his own father, Grievous would gladly allow him to. "It is time now, Zekalov, for you to go train with your new master." Grievous stood and ordered his crew to set the ship on a course for Dooku's lair. He took his son with him to their personal quarters. It was the only place he could show his caring nature for the boy. For the longest time, General Grievous aggressively viewed compassion and even love as a weakness. Until Zekalov entered his life. The moment his son came to be with him, it slowly began to change him. He never imagined he would feel these emotions for anyone ever again. Grievous knew for sure that these long-dormant feelings were for his child and him alone. His son was the one and only exception. He looked down at his youngest son with steely resolve. He knelt down and grabbed his son gently by the shoulders and looked him square in the eyes. "Son, when you go train with the Count, you will not see me for some time. If you disobey the Count for any reason, you will suffer great punishments that not even I have given you. You will do everything Dooku orders of you. Remember that you hold the strength of our people in here." He tapped a metal talon on Zekalov's chest. "Father, when will I see you again?" "I don't know." Grievous tipped his son's chin up and made sure he was looking at him. He spoke to his child then, not as the tough, war-hardened, overly strict, Jedi-slaughtering general of the droid armies that the rest of the galaxy knew him as, but as his father. He spoke as softly as his vocabulator would allow him and ran a hand gently through his son's soft, ebony hair. Grievous's golden eyes betrayed the love he felt for the boy. "I promise you, Zekalov, we will be together again one day. Always know that I care about you and want the best for you. Understand, child?" "Yes, father." A few hours later. Father and son stood just outside Dooku's abode. Grievous knew that to show any signs of love or compassion in front of the Sith was a sign of weakness and would herald great pain. He did his best to explain that to his son before saying farewell. Zekalov nodded in understanding and gripped his war mask tightly in one hand, feeling incredibly nervous. "Remember your history. You are not doing this just for me but for the rest of our people. Remember everything I've taught you." "I will, father." "Zekalov, make your father proud and become the greatest warrior you can ever hope to be. No matter what happens, remember true warriors don't fear anything. Be strong, my little warrior." "Yes, father, I will. I promise." They entered through the door to Dooku's study. The Count was looking out one window, with hands clasped behind his back. He turned and nodded in greeting. Grievous approached the man who had been awaiting them. He presented Asajj Ventress's lightsabers to the Sith Lord. As promised, my son is yours to train, Count. Train him well. You have done well, General. Return to the main fleet at Geonosis and await my command. Yes, my lord. Grievous's golden eyes met his son's own one last time before he left. He nodded slightly at him in encouragement and then walked past him. The father within Grievous, that was Sheelal, wept bitterly as he turned his back on his youngest son and left him to his fate, for the Sith were unmerciful and would undoubtedly break Zekalov and rip away his good and caring nature. Grievous wasn't sure if Zekalov would still be the son he had come to know and love when next they met. As he boarded his shuttle, he glanced once over his shoulder. Forgive me, my son. I'll return for you, I promise. With his silent vow, the general of the droid armies returned to the invisible hand, already feeling darkness seeping into his heart. He hoped his son came to hate Dooku as much as him. If anything, hate would make him strong and would be the element that helped his son survive whatever Dooku had in store for him. Live today, my son, so that you may fight tomorrow, until we meet again.